Rajesh, first of all, thank you for making time. And importantly, it's been wonderful to partner with you over the last couple of years. We've enjoyed the journey. And I appreciate you coming and sharing a few thoughts and having this conversation with me on this lovely afternoon.
No, it's my pleasure, Vikash.
It's good seeing you. Yes, today what we wanted to do was delve into a very interesting topic that's been gaining steam, more acceleration post the pandemic. But we've seen this phenomena play out over a period of time, which is the entire space of paying per performance in the services business. And I want to just get this conversation started with just getting your opening thoughts on how do you see this world evolving, more broadly into how CX is changing, and then we'll touch upon the whole space of how the commercial engagement modules and partnership models are evolving.
No, absolutely, Vikash. It's a pretty hot topic right now, and we've seen massive acceleration in clients' expectation of what we call the value-based models. Different industries have different rhythms of their sophistication and understanding. And, what we've seen pre-pandemic, we've seen, CX has always been used as a channel, as a cost center. It was always used as a labor arbitrage mechanism to say that, what value can you provide for me from against my captive, which could be domestic, so US to US, or it could be to nearshore or offshore. It was always seen as a cost arbitrage. But thanks to the pivot that we saw during the pandemic when, lockdowns happened, customer behavior, the expectations change, we've seen the channel of CX not just being the cost center, but being a massive revenue accelerator. So for the first time, in the last 5-6 years, we have seen customers viewing CX as a way of not only delivering a level of acceptable service, but that service towards driving revenues, towards retaining their customers, every mechanism towards driving lifetime value. And when that happens, they expect that the partners to put in some skin in the game, so that on the journey of where there is measurable benefits that could be defined, they want you to co-invest in everything from co-creation of the IPs at the highest level to delivering a set of numbers, either higher revenue numbers or better retention numbers, which could be measured. So we're seeing that. But one thing which has become a lot more stringent, they've become a lot more unreasonable. They still don't have the measurement tools and the ability to do it. But we've seen that wave of thinking happening, and I'll be intrigued. I mean, obviously we are one company, and you consult with so many companies, both in IT and in the business services, business process outsourcing side. What do you see?
If you reflect back on the pre-pandemic era, there was an entire discussion that CX is going to get automated, less relevant. It's merely a service element. Multiple things happened during the pandemic, right? CX became more important. Human touch also became important. Empathy came back into the process. And that being, as you said, the role of customer service in retention, in actually providing superior experience, and then obviously driving revenue became important. We are seeing this across sectors. We are seeing this across service providers. Just the way the CX has been thought about is beginning to shift a bit. So that's point one, completely resonate with what you just described. And the second part is, with this shift, and more broadly, I think the whole services phenomena, as things are changing, one conversation that's become more and more involved or becomes more common is, can you partner for success? Can you partner for impact? I would admit, being around the block for almost 2 decades of this industry, this conversation is not new, but the relevance of the conversation, but more importantly, the number of occurrences of this conversation becoming high. And now we are seeing examples of where companies are actually willing to put that to motion. So just walk the talk. The talk has been there for long, but we are seeing more and more walk the talk. I think the challenge that we are seeing is, as you rightly described, it's not easy. It's good to have the conversation, but when it comes down to actually putting this in practice, as you think about the contracting models, as you think about the capabilities required, as you think about the governance required, on both sides becomes very, very challenging. And it leads to a combination of difficult situations to a few instances where it's actually been successful partnerships. So if I were to put that lens from your experience, as you're thinking about working with your clients, how has it been? What are the learnings? And, what is making it work where it's working? And where does it not work when it's not working?
So, excellent question, Vikash. And, to be honest, we're still in the early days of the whole value-based deliverance model. And at a very tactical level, if I break up the centers of buying within our client organization, if a buying decision is slowly driven by the procurement group, for them, the value argument comes back in measurable numbers. It comes back to what is an acceptable price for an acceptable level of outcome. But if the same decision is more driven by the business, whose understanding of the outcomes that they need that affects their own individual budgets and their individual standing within the organization, it then becomes a lot more strategic in nature, because they're the partnership. So procurement treats you as a vendor, business treats you as a partner. So depending on which industry verticals we are operating in, and at which, and what are the pain points, stroke opportunities in these industry verticals, the behavior is extremely different. So there's no one brush that fits all. But at a starting point, where we believe that the client has systems that enables us in measuring the outcomes. First is we need to know, if you're trying to drive value, what is our start point? So in some of our client organizations, they're very well data organized. So once you're very well data organized, you know your swim lanes, you know your customer journeys, you know segmentation, everything that you act on, which then drives value. How is value driven? You have to act on data. You have to solve for the problem basis the data that you see. Okay. But where it is not properly organized, the value-based argument falls through the crack. It ultimately comes back to a cost argument. And when they see competitors of theirs actually in the value segment, that's when we believe that other people within the same industry segment will work. It's not that there's homogeneity. If I take financial services, it's not that everybody behaves the same. If I take healthcare, not that everybody behaves. So you have leaders, you have somebody in the middle of the pack, and then you have the laggard. So the question is, where does your customer segment sit, and how is your own learning in creating these value-based models? Because the value-based model doesn't come in isolation. It comes from the learning that we have.
Correct.
And what I fundamentally believe is we've been in this business for 30 years now. I mean, there is enough understanding that, the work we do with various Fortune 500, FTSE 500 companies, and we truly are a utility, and our ability to convince clients that the value-based model will work and what is the partnership they need to engage with us is where the long sales cycles come in. But but clients today, I never used to believe in the old adage that, you can't have the cake and eat it too. I never could get it. But now you see how they want the immediate gratification, but they also want the value to be delivered. And sometimes there is always a timing mismatch between what you deliver today and what outcomes you can deliver over a period of time. So, but the world is moving there, and that's the way to go. And early adopters that put a stake on the ground and are willing to put skin in the game through risk capital, truly in co-creating IPs and how this works, I think we'll get a disproportionate share of the future outsourcing market.
Yeah. One other thought, that just from a service provider lens, and if actually as a service provider ourselves, we fundamentally believe in the whole value-based notion, is many conversations in the past seem to suggest this is going to be a margin driver. And one of the big things that we've observed is this is actually not a margin driver. Most companies have, at least the service providers, have conversations often revolve around, it's going to help us improve margins. I get more control. I can manage my costs. The big shift that we are seeing, and this is actually what we are suggesting to many of our companies, is this is actually a revenue accelerator.
Absolutely.
It allows you to participate in businesses that otherwise you would not be participating. It creates optionality for higher margin if you run the business well. You manage the portfolio well because you're taking risk. There will be risks. You will get rewarded. If you manage well, the ratio will trade off in a positive territory. But that's a big shift that we are seeing. And so that means the kind of thinking that one needs to bring to bear as a service provider also needs to come with mindset that is about, it helps me allow to expand what I do more of it, and if I run this well, I will get better margins as well in the process. How at Results are you seeing this, and what are you doing to just bring that perspective in and drive that in the business?
No. I again, Vikash, it's at some level it's an operator's nightmare too, because the first thing, our starting point is anything I do, I'm not going to change your budget. I mean, you have companies that are understanding of how value-based models work who are naive, and there are some that are native. And the ones which are native, probably the size of the pie is also a lot smaller because of how quickly they have adopted to the best of breed of technology and how they manage their own customer franchise and what they need to do. But 90% of the market is not at that segment.
Exactly.
And to that extent, this first starting point is, am I going to be going out of my budget because on this whole value-based system, we're making investments, and if it doesn't play out, I'm going to be off my budget. So the starting point is, you, Mr. Partner stroke vendor, are you willing to make the investments upfront and without changing my budget? And then as the value goes beyond the baseline, that is my budget, I will then figure out what the gain share model is. So we've seen some of those elements. The problem with those elements is, if the measurement systems of our clients are robust, it can be worked out. At some point, you don't know whether, am I driving the change? Are they driving the change themselves? So there is also the question of, how do you have a governance and transparency which ensures that there is a fair reward for the person that's taking risk. Again, changes from industry to industry. Some industries are sophisticated, some industries are not. But the future of the understanding that scale drives margin will happen. Every unit cost gets amortized over a higher level of revenue. The unit cost goes down, is an understanding which happens. Clients always are trying to see how much variability they can drive in their fixed cost structure. And that comes only from higher revenues. It's not about trying to reduce the existing cost structure out, maintaining the same revenue line, because that will ultimately reflect in the customer experience. And their ability to retain those customers or drive more value from those customers becomes a problem. So we are preaching to the choir to people who get it, and we are teaching people on how this will play itself out. So the spectrum is wide. There will be an inflection point which I think will happen. But because I'd like to understand from your perspective, both as a consulting organization that's advising boards. I mean, there's there's a board mandate on everything that's happening around the whole AI ecosystem, around cost ecosystems, around strategy. And then how does that translate also down into the organizations where it ultimately, the whole value-based mechanism has to come from the executioner side of the organization? So from your perspective, how does the skin in the game argument, what is the governance required for it to actually be seeped into, and how are you advising clients on that?
So it's a great question, and I'll tell you, we are probably running into swim lanes. There is a world which is actually, to be honest, we are going through that phenomenon right now where there's an expectation to bring efficiencies in what companies are spending, often driven by a very cost agenda. And that's the current economic environment we're dealing with, where the pressure is really, what I'm doing, can I do better, cheaper, consolidate, bring efficiencies. But importantly, as we start to think of more progressive organization, we think of the medium term, I think a couple of things that I think are important, which we start to advise our clients, and some of the work that I do starts to touch upon that as well, is think of scope in a manner where it allows you to create a genuine partnership. Don't think of it in a transactional fashion, because you get transaction scope out, you get transactional return in. The ability to influence impact gets contained. I think that's one. Second, be strategic about partnerships, right? Fewer, deeper, co-investing, so that as you think about co-creating the future, there is a relationship that builds. I believe value-based pricing needs to be based on an underlying trust.
Right.
It cannot be a transactional relationship, and you can do that with 20 partners at one go. It needs to be with few we select. So just think of partnership in a more strategic manner. Think of broader scope. engage the right stakeholders in. If you give it to somebody whose mandate is to drive efficiency, that's what you will get. But if efficiency is the business impact you're looking at it, make sure you structure the right way. Thematically, these three things are important. But underlying that, given these are partnerships, this is not running your own business, there's obviously a commercial agenda and a contractual framework that needs to be put in place. And big part of the thinking is how do you structure contracts that allow for that to play out in a more efficient manner, and then embed the right capabilities in both organizations in the way that it drives value-based pricing. And it's a non-trivial task. And I'll just reflecting on some of the other experience of being on the other side, advising you and your peers. If I were to just put myself in your shoes, in a value-based pricing, I'm hostess to the macro demands and environment, which I was not earlier. So I'm not just taking risk on you,
but on the environment.
But I'm taking a risk on environment, which historically was not my strength. So my risk management practices have changed. I am shaping conversations which are very value-led, from a conversation which said, you have X hundred FTs, I can provide that cheaper, more trained, more skilled, from a different geography, and get you the economics and the advantage. This puts a set of pressures in the services organization themselves. And I would admit, in my conversations, people are beginning to talk about value-based pricing, but it almost is just seen with a narrow lens of a commercial model.
Right.
I almost believe, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is value-based constructs is almost an organizational transformation imperative if I were to think of ResultsCX and other peers, because the capabilities you're building in sales, in contracting, in finance, in risk management, in just the process of selling and engagement, the way you do your reviews, they all need to fundamentally be anchored around the notion of value. How at Results are you thinking about this entire framework and putting it all together?
No, excellent question, Vikash. I think, the starting point, which works for me is having been trained in numbers is, as you know, having been a CFO before, the starting point is what is the capital I can allocate to take the risk. So first is the capital allocation from internal that can go and subscribe. Now, there are several pools of capital. So there is a capital allocation that I can make because of the efficiencies that is driven by my COO's organization, which is P&L management, operating leverages, looking at paid hours to work hours, looking at the domain build-up, the understanding of the business, etc., etc. Then I have the CFO's organization, everything from currency, everything from hedging policies to procurement to every efficiency that I can drive, which then allows me to extract capital which otherwise is locked, which then brings it into a pool of, again, capital allocation. I do the same with human resources. How do I drop a couple of percentage points in attrition, which improves the time to competency? How do I retain people better, which then drives the performance? So again, that's domain, it breeds domain. So that again comes. So once I get this capital allocation, this pool of capital, then the 4 E's of the world, what we call. First is, we've been in this business for a long time. I mean, we are native to understanding of a process and a domain. Now we need to bring that into creating a utility, which is what we've done. So how do I embed my agenda with my clients? It's a function of consultative selling. Mm-hmm. This is not about showing up and saying that, I can do 50 seats in Lakeland, I can do 100 seats in Tegucigalpa, I can do 1,000 seats in Manila. This is about what am I solving for you? How do I embed technology and digital? What are the problems I fix and ship, and what are the problems I ship and fix? And in that, how do I bring the whole construct of how do I solve for your budgetary pressures? Which first I need, it's the classical saying, I have to feed a hungry person before I talk philosophy, rather than talk philosophy for somebody who has missed a couple of meals before. So embedding the agenda and making sure that you're catering to the right audience is the first. And once that is done, we should damn well know what we want to deliver as outcomes, which is establishing that baseline, which is where the systems processes comes into place. 6 out of 10, a lot of things will go wrong. Mm-hmm. So then the question is, how do you evaluate the outcomes and make sure that you're able, using the risk capital and the capital allocation pool that has been created, how do you buttress the impact so that it doesn't sink your company, to make sure that you're able to then go back to the drawing board, re-engineer, so that the value-based conversation goes up. And the last E is, How do you endure the turbulence? That if you're a public company, you're different. If you're a private company, but all of them have a certain level of accountability that is required. How do you manage that? So I think we live our lives through these 4Es and capital allocation, and it's a cycle. But it's like a machine learning. It's an organization learning for us. As we're getting more mature and how we are, dealing with these situations. And as I said, we can't be in every dance, but we have to pick and choose the dance that we're good at and make an impact. And hopefully, it'll bear fruit. And that's a belief we have. But what's happening is customers today, it's no more a conversation in a pub or in a Friday evening chit chat. This is now boardroom front and center. As much as generative AI is, and so generative AI efficiency, revenue accretion, they're all interlinked in some way, because you're ultimately creating a knowledge-based organization which enables you to. What we are struggling with is timing. Because what I drive, value is such a broad spectrum. Value is, I'm not measuring the market cap increase of my clients, I'm measuring revenues and margins. Ultimately, that's what it comes on into. But the actions I take, investments I take today could bear action 18 months down the line. But by then, the customers might have forgotten what we have done. And that's when the challenge of the success of these value-based models play out. So I'd be keen to understand from your perspective, because again, you guys are the influencers, with the C-suites that you operate in when you're setting up the agenda. How are you encouraging them to embrace this measurement of this value-based model and what I call the patience quotient? Sometimes things take longer, but when they play themselves out, the accelerators are phenomenal.
It's a very interesting question. I'm going to connect this to something else you said, which is endure. And one of the challenges I see service providers dealing with is really the fact that, and it's actually translated in sales incentives, if you do value-based pricing, the incurrence and occurrence of cost and the recovery of value are not synchronous.
Absolutely.
So if you are in a quarter-to-quarter machine, you're out of sync on when money gets paid and when you put in the cost, which is you're getting accounted for the costs. And this is the other part of the portfolio management that one should do. It creates other complexities. And going back to the discussion, it's an organizational transformation. If you're responsible to a street and if 30-40% of your portfolio is linked to value-based pricing, how are you predicting and forecasting already? So there is this challenge. Now, putting the other side that you questioned, that you asked about, how do we encourage corporates? I think it is a combination of the following. One, you need to start with progressive organizations who have the conviction to take risks with partners like this. But importantly, if I were to put this on your head, on the service provider partner's head, one of the things that we've been actively encouraging our clients is start your conversations with value. Every QBR that you do with your client, talk about the value delivered, talk about what you have done, take a longer term view of the value and the impact delivered, versus I had XFTs, I did a productivity improvement, we're down 10%, I gave you the savings. Start with where and how are you creating business impact, and try and create buy-in with your clients that you're genuinely impacting business over a period of time. This is the muscle which is not native to this industry. And so, while at some level you have to encourage the organization, I think it's incumbent upon the responsibility of the partners to change the narrative and the engagement with the clients and actually start to assert a bit. What we're struggling with is you do the work, you're doing the value, but there's an inherent discomfort in saying, I did this, I impacted the value, but how do I do the bridge?
Right.
There's a bit of stepping up that's required, and that's how you engage the clients. And over a period of time, both partners start to see this. So it's a bit of a two-way street, at least the way I see it. And it's a non-trivial issue. It's non-trivial to get clients, service providers and partners to say, I delivered X amount of value. Some of them have gone to a point of having very catchy advertising taglines. We delivered X trillion dollars of market cap affiliate because of the work we did. But that needs to translate into a client conversation, which means you also, to your other point, evaluate and measure. Measure that on an ongoing basis, have the conversation, and make sure the client is seeing this over a long period. It's an important part of the work that needs to get done, But I think the responsibility is on the both sides, at least the way I see it. I think one of the discussions that we've been encouraging our clients, and including our conversations with you, have been, this is an opportunity to differentiate. This is, while this is oft talked about, less implemented, not just being a economic and a competitive advantage, because as we talked about, it's a revenue accelerator. When played well, it can be a margin accelerator as well. But it's also an opportunity to stand up and differentiate within the peer group by being creative in how you partner. At Results, what are you doing and how you're thinking about this, and just your thoughts?
No, absolutely, Vikash, spot on. Because every client has multiple options. They have, and every Fortune 100, FTSE 100 company never works with one partner. It's always multi-tenant. That's how the risk and that's how they spread their eggs. So what we are doing is, our starting point is to tell the client that we're thinking about your business, and the flip from being a vendor to a partner is being told what to do and telling the client what needs to get done if they need to change the narrative. Mm-hmm. Some of them are incremental, some of them are step changes, because again, if we work for, let's say, 15 healthcare insurance companies, I have the benefit of creating a utility of understanding, 15 best practices. There may be many bad practices, but 15 best practices, mm-hmm. out of which one specific payer could have the benefit of 3. Mm-hmm. Now, how do I bring the other 12 that we have access to, that we build competencies, which then makes my client move up in the game that they're playing in? So it is a crowded space. It is, a lot of us at some point in some of the work we do, I'm being candid, is undifferentiated. But, the more we put things on the table of our clients, when they believe that we are a thinking organization and not just an organization that's executing on order, what I call an order-taking organization, mm-hmm. that's when some of the battles are won. Now, it's still a long way off to win the war, but each and every battle that we win with the stakeholders that we deal with, because in some of our clients, we deal with 50 stakeholders. They have 50 individual customers, mm-hmm. with different, and there's no homogeneity in any of them. So it's a day in, this is an execution challenge. It's a day in and day out execution challenge, and keeping execution and then keeping the thinking power to show the client what could be the new normal over the next 12, 18 months and 3 years. And then testing, the time tested that when the 12 months have lapsed, what we have said has actually been what they should have done, gives us the calling card to say that, hey, these guys I can trust. Trust is important, because people do business with people. At the end of the day, I can bring 100 different capabilities to the table, but if I don't have the trust of my counterpart out there, all the 4 E's will fall apart. Then the customer and we would only be enduring a troubled relationship. Everything else will fall apart. So I think so. To that extent, I think bringing in the trust, and also what's happening is working with consultants like BCG and what work we have done together and what you've done for us. All these bring in also a level of evangelization in the marketplace. I mean, you're also evangelizing about the value-based model. It's not that we are the only ones who are talking about this. You're talking about it. You're talking about, what's happening in all the industry segments you offer. So for me, these partnerships, be it with a consulting organization like yourself, with a technology service provider that could be in workforce management, could be something in attendance management, could be something in HR, all these, the ecosystem of how all of us come together to solve that value base becomes extremely critical. And honestly, thanks to you and personally for sponsoring a lot of the work that we have done, and to BCG for bringing us where we are.
First of all, thank you for the kind words. We've enjoyed the partnerships ourselves. And second, thank you for coming here and spending the time.
My pleasure.
Wonderful conversation on a great afternoon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Vikash.